The win total for the Pirates is upper 80s. I'm going to mark myself down as 89, which is on the high end of
89.
comfortable.
Obviously, you know already how Joe feels about the Pirates. He's so positive that he has pulled me to the over as well. I'm going to say 80 wins.
Welcome back to episode 12 of Out of Town Yinzers. I'm Joe alongside Justin. Today we're talking Pirates first, opening day, Steelers, Pens, and we're going to skip on Pitt, do a little March Madness. But crack a beer, sip a latte. We got a lot to get into, and this might be one of my favorite episodes of the year.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say here. I hope you guys realize how big of a deal this is to Joe. This is basically Christmas Eve for Joe every year as an adult. So we're going to go over all of our predictions here, get into some fun stuff with the Pirates in general. Joe, if you want to just start it off right off the top, let's Mr. Pirate here can get into all of his predictions. We'll go back and forth here, but just to start, we're going to start hot. Joe, what's the win total for the Pirates here?
The win total for the Pirates is upper 80s. I'm going to mark myself down as 89, which is on the high end of
89.
comfortable. I think 86 is probably feels better. I'm definitely on the over of the 77 from the betting line, so way, way above that. But I am Rosie on the Pirates. I just think the pitching's good enough and the hitting's coming along. So I'm really, really excited about the Pirates at 89 wins. And we'll see what that means for the playoffs in a second. But Justin, are the Pirates breaking 500 on your side of the fence?
So yeah, if you're a longtime listener, obviously you know already how Joe feels about the Pirates. He's so positive that he has pulled me to the over as well. I'm gonna say 80 wins. So I'm taking the over as well. The over it's fluctuating a little bit between 78-ish, right around there, for the over total on the wins. I'm saying over. Well, like you said, we'll get into a second, but yeah, 80 wins for me.
So if you have 80 wins, that's obviously out of the playoffs. I think the Pirates will be playing playoff games this year. Whether or not they get to 89 wins,
Yeah.
that's kind of a pretty strong thing. We'll see. But I also think that with those 89 wins, that they'll be first place in the division. I told you guys a few episodes again to lock that in. I'm doubling down. Pirates for the division, first time since 1992. Let's get excited. It's 24 years later, or 34 years later, uh, since that time. So, my division is gonna go Pirates, Cubs, Brewers. So I think the Brewers are taking a little bit step back from what they've currently have. I think they've kind of been over-punching the last few years. Reds, and then Cardinals.
So I'm actually with you on some of that. I do think, and we've talked about this before. So my prediction is Cubs, Reds, Pirates, Brewers, and Cardinals. So I'm actually, I guess technically I'm a little bit lower than you even on the Brewers. They have been the division winner. Like last year, the stat I think here to take from this, and this is maybe a stat for you, but the NL Central winner has been plus 600 or more. Last year, the Brewers were plus 750. So the Pirates would
There you
be
go.
less of a long shot than the Brewers were last year. And I agree. I think the Brewers really, over exceeded on their talent and their expectations. So the Pirates would actually be less of an underdog to win the division than the Brewers last year.
Hell yes. Let's go.
Yeah, so again, I do think it's going to come down similar to you. I think the Reds, Pirates, and Brewers are going to be fighting for the second spot. I think it's going to be real close. If you ask me tomorrow, maybe I have the order different, but I think those three will be tight all year.
I think part of it too, I don't think there's gonna be a runaway winner in this division when it comes down to it. So it's
Right.
one of those that,
Right.
there's gonna be some hot streaks, some cold streaks, when it comes to the Pirates. I just think that their cold streaks aren't gonna be as cold when you got a starting rotation like they do that's running it out there, and enough bats to sprinkle it in to get a few more runs. You know what? I don't think people realize how big of a difference it is to being, like, 29th in the league in runs to, like, 15th. So,
Right.
it's not like you're asking for the world to kinda just try to get into that middle of the pack and runs scored. And then, if you got enough runs scored, that's when the pitching really takes over.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I get that. that difference, again, you look at it game by game, and you go from worst in the league to just average. You just need to be average with what they've been getting, and it's your team just looks significantly different night to night.
I think they have enough bats to be average, and that's kind of what you're arguing here. So, and then once the whole thing with baseball too is just getting into the dance. We're in March
Right.
Madness right now. There aren't really Cinderellas in March Madness,
Yeah.
but there can be Cinderellas in baseball when you're talking about how rotations go and how some playoff baseball goes. So, would be fun to just get in there, to get in that dance, and I think it's going to happen.
So the next, just moving on. So Skenes wins was the next thing that we wanted to give a prediction for. Joe, give us your wins total for Skenes here.
Well, like, when you get to 89 wins for the Pirates, how you get there is an over 20 wins from Skenes. I think Skenes had 187 innings pitched last year. I think he easily breaks the 200 inning mark this year. And I think he gets closer to kind of where, almost as Sandy Alcantara was like 4 years ago, where you kind of get up to 220, 230. Skenes is 23. He's going to ride that arm. He's strong. He's not going to show any signs of slowing down the way his work ethic is. I feel like he's going to put up some really Verlander like innings. And when you get to that many innings, he's pitching deeper into games. And that means he's winning those games that before, when he was coming out in the sixth innings, that was collapsing after him. That was kind of where he was getting those really good starts, but still losses for overall. So I think he's pitching deeper into games this year, which means he's also going to be getting those wins, which is going to push him to 22 and his second consecutive Cy Young, if you want to double on that, for
Oh
sure.
wow, you're just going all in. You're just giving us bonus bets here. I like it. I like it. Well, I have 15. I have more, but I think that was even the over on his
It was the
wins.
over. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm at 15. I'm hitting the over, just like the overall wins, and you're well above my total, which I great. I like it. I see the Skeens thing going a little bit different. Like I could see him pitching exactly what you just said. I don't know that he'll go quite as far into games. We'll touch on that in a second here with some of the bets, but I do think there will be a little bit more variance with the Pirates in games. They may win some of the games he starts, but when he comes out, and this is where we maybe disagree on the length that he'll go in games. He comes out and maybe, I think there's more variance in general with them, with the way they're going to hit, the way they're going to field, that he may come out, they may have a bad inning or two, flips the other way, they end up winning the game, but because of the way it played out, he doesn't get the win. That may happen a couple of times. I could see that easily happening. So I'm not really that far off. I thought I was being positive here, and I saw that number. I was like, whoa, Joe's just going all in on that. So not impossible by any means. I mean, like you said, you talk about a guy that if he just got, a little bit of the luck to go the other way with run support, all of a sudden that 22 looks very doable.
He has yet to have an ERA over 2. Like,
Yeah, I know. I
he's
know.
just a generational guy. And
Right.
you're blinking at 20 wins for a generational guy. It doesn't make any sense. You just give him just a sprinkle of support and he can get to over that 20 wins. So I'm excited for that. The next one on the list, you're a little bit more rosy, I guess, on what a Pirate fan would want to see than I am.
Yeah, so we were doing Konnor Griffin, basically his call up date when he comes up. Mine is definitely like a reach, I would say. I'll explain my reasoning. What I'm saying is Joe's going to get to see his favorite buddy Konnor Griffin in Columbus, because he does open, I think, the second series of the season in Columbus. He's there for like 5 nights. So Joe will probably be there all 5 nights if you're wondering. And then he gets called up right after that on April 8th is what I'm guessing. There's a reason with the way it could play out why they would want to do the 8th. I think once you get to the 9th or beyond that, they could actually run into losing the whole comp pick they get back if he, there's some weird scenarios that could play out. He would have to be, NL Rookie of the Year or top 3, I think, in MVP voting his first couple years. So they could get a first round pick back for him. They just went through it. I could see them. This is like an outlier. This is me reaching a little bit. This would not be great odds, for this to happen. But I could see them going, we don't want to lose on the comp pick again. We're not going to be patient enough to wait until, the Super 2. So we're using this as a bargaining tool right now to see if he'll sign. He doesn't sign, let's just bring him up on the 8th. It's a little bit of an outlier, but it could happen.
I would love to see it. That'd be phenomenal. I'm definitely a little bit later. I'm kind of more on the Paul Skenes track. So mid-May
Right.
would be my rosy optimistic track for Konnor Griffin. So that would mean he earned his way back to the bigs, or back, I guess, to the bigs for the first time. That's my Rosie prediction. I think more likely though is probably Konnor Griffin than June, and we'll
Yeah.
kind of see how that season plays out. But I think that probably is the most likely path. You know, you see a 20-year
Right.
old coming up, probably around the 4th of July or a few weeks before that. Is probably the most likely scenario. So we're both being a little rosy as we are on all the Pirates predictions so far. So keep it going. But the
Yeah,
last
mine
one
is
we had,
definitely a long shot
yeah,
for sure.
yeah, you know, it has to almost come with you're thinking of contracts coming if it's
Right.
anytime in April, which would be
Right.
unbelievable. I had a friend that texted me. He said, 9 for 100 exclamation point. And I'm like, what does that mean? And then he said, Connor Griffin. I'm like, no, that hasn't happened. I immediately
Nah.
checked Twitter, heart palpitations. I was like, you can't do that
Yeah.
to me. That's not the wrong thing to text a guy for sure.
I'm
But
just gonna have
no,
people starting to text you that all throughout the season just to get reactions.
yeah, it has to be a higher number to that for me to
Yeah.
believe it. So the last prediction we have before we have a couple of bets, and really the bets that I've already had, I've laid it already through. So you got to just ride the highs that I've had. But my Pirates home run leader for the season, I think this is one of the few years since probably like even the Pedro days, maybe kind of going back all the way there, where you had multiple guys that could lead the Pirates in home runs and also hit over 30 of them. So there's been a
Right.
lot of years where you didn't know who was going to lead the Pirates in home runs, but that's just because no one could hit home runs. This year, there's a few guys who can hit them. Who do you think's going to lead the Pirates in home runs on your side?
Yeah, to your point, we don't know for the right reasons for the first time in a while. So I have Lau. I'll get to him in a second. I like a bet on him. I was going back and forth. I was just leaning left-handed bat because of PNC in general. Um, but I have Lau. The over-under is just a little bit too much of a reach for me otherwise. But I will get to a bet. I'll explain why I was having a tough time with this in a second.
So I went with O'Neill Cruz on the other side of that. I think we've said before, I think he's one of the biggest swing players for the Pirates this year. If he leads the Pirates in home runs, and that happens to be somewhere over 25 home runs, then look out when it comes to some of the things that could happen for that Pirates lineup when that's happening. So that's really a key to the Pirates hitting again that 89 wins. If you want to line it all up, how do you get to that 89 wins? I think you get there through Skenes. I think you get there from Connors coming up before Memorial Day, and I think you get an Oneil Cruz leading the Pirates in home runs. And if those three things happen, I think 89 wins is easily possible.
Yeah, I think we talked about this last week. I think Cruz, again, wide, range of outcomes. I think he's maybe the key to the lineup, and for them to hit their ceiling is going to be through Cruz. You kind of just said that, but that's my take in general. If they're going to get to your number, I think Cruz will have a lot to say with why. So
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you run through a couple of your bets? My bets again were just more, hey, there's
yeah,
some pretty good plus odds, I think, on Skeens wins. You can get up there if you want to take some change. You don't have to get all the way up to 20. I think 20 is like plus 1,300. So like you're
yeah,
getting in some
yeah.
real money when you get there from Skeens aspects. Playoffs, things of that nature for the Pirates are really, really sweet bets. So I think that's a good, you know, risk reward bet when you're a Pirates fan.
Yeah, and that's again my first bet here is the same idea. It's not just something that these aren't like 50-50. All these bets aren't 50-50. Sometimes you're getting good odds that you like and you think the odds make sense. So like my first one, Lau, over 30 home runs. That's plus 146. I like those odds. I completely get why it would be plus 146. Vegas is telling you, hey, we don't think this is going to happen, but this is about where we're putting the over under. Yeah, I think he hit 31 last year. Playing in PNC this year, I think he gets 60% of his total at PNC, and that over under at plus 146 I like there a lot. It could come down to how much he plays. If you look at his splits in general, the 2 years that he struggled in terms of home runs, he didn't play quite as much. Last year 31, I think his career high was 39. He played, so he wasn't being platooned or anything like that season. So it's about staying healthy for sure. And then again, it's just a bet on PNC to an extent with the over on that one.
I do love to see him in PNC. He's going to be a
Yeah,
great lefty in PNC. I think he's going to hit a lot of home runs. I just don't know if he's going to play enough games when it
right,
comes down to it. I
right,
think the way the Pirates lineup is constructed, if they had fewer DH players, so if you
right.
think of your Cruz, O'Hearn, that group. Both of those guys really don't have a position. When you have Horowitz, who's also kind of in that bucket too, it makes it harder to give Lowe an off day and keep him in the lineup for his bat. So I think that's going to be something that'll kind of take a few games off of him. And then also just, if he's going to be playing then more on the flip side of that, then more games at second base because he won't get some of those days off at DH, then the injury risk becomes even greater for someone like that later in his career
Yep.
playing in the middle
Yep.
infield. So
Right.
I think that's probably the biggest downside to the 30 home runs for Lowe. But, if he plays, 140 plus games, I think he's easily at 30 home
Right.
runs.
Right. Yeah, and I agree. That's exactly was my thought process was this is kind of a play on it's probably a 50-50 bet just in general, assuming he played that many. So that's why you're getting the plus odds on top of it is there's clearly with his age and just in general some downside risk with injuries in general.
All right. So for the first time since you said the Pirates were under 500, which is probably the last negative thing we said in the last 10 minutes, which is not a typical Pirates segment over the
Yeah.
last 5 years, but you do have an under Paul Skenes bet. Sacrilegious,
I
I feel like.
I do, yeah. So I'm gonna, and again, this is another one where it's minus 106, but if you look at the odds on the over, Vegas thinks the over is more likely to hit. I have under 210 and a half strikeouts. Now to kind of go the opposite direction of what Joe was saying, which again, there's obviously a path there, a very easy and clear path there. I think he had a few more strikeouts in this last year. It was like 216, somewhere around that. I could be off on the exact number. Um, but I think part of it, I heard a few race series whispers this spring that he's maybe pitching to contact a little bit more. So this would be
Huh?
a play on that. I'm not as optimistic on them extending him. And, I think you used the term that maybe the gloves are off. Very easily could be, this is just there's different paths you're picking here. This is just a bet on maybe he pitches to contact a little bit more and a way to get deeper into games maybe is you pitch to contact a little bit more. Hence the race series reference. Will that happen? Won't I have no idea. I'm just going off of, hey, I'm playing the odds here. 50-50. That's a lot of strikeouts, obviously. Now, am I gonna say no way he does it? Of course not. I mean, he's more than capable of doing that. There's just a couple paths. Obviously, we don't want to see an injury, but any type of injury is gonna put him below that number. When you have a power pitcher with the type of spin rate he does, it's not like it's unheard of for,
Hey,
him to
hey,
miss
hey,
some
hey.
time.
Nope, nope. Moving on.
Hey,
Moving on.
I'm just giving
Yeah.
you the
Hey, hey.
reasoning. I'm giving you the reasoning for
Nope,
the
nope. We're not. We're
bet.
not. Nope, nope. No, we're not saying that. He could be
Yeah,
under, but it's
okay.
has nothing to do with that. So
Okay.
I kind of had the over on that, but I could see kind of the, just trying to get outs type of aspect to get deeper into
Right.
games. I think that's the
Right.
one that makes more sense to me. And you kind of saw that in spring training too, where some of his velocity wasn't fully there, where he was just trying to pin place, a 96, 97 mile per hour fastball
Yeah, only
other than
96
roaring
is what he
back to
said.
99, 100. But he's still got that in the
Yeah.
tank if he needs it there too.
Right.
So do you have any last bets for us here for
I
the
do. I have
Pirates?
one more in this. So, and to be clear, both of those Vegas likes the other side. We're getting a lot better odds with the Loud bet. With Skenes, they lean the other way. Cruz, I'm going to go a little bit even longer on this one. So this is a play on what Joe was saying. This is basically an exact bet on what Joe is saying, and I'm going to go over his over under is right around. It depends on where you look. Right around 21 and a half home runs. I'm going to go the over on that. If you really want to play Joe's home run leader, which I don't think is bad at all. I have him second. If I had to pick, I like plus 255 to go 30 plus home runs. I really like those odds. I could see that easily happening. If things are going to break right, I could see them really breaking right for him. He, one of the tops in the league with exit velocity last year. Things break the right way. I like those odds.
Yeah, no, I can absolutely see it too. I obviously had it. I feel like the Pirates home run leader this year is going to break that 30 plateau. At least I hope so with one of those
Yeah.
three. So I think Cruz over 21 home runs is there. He has to swing and a miss though, because like when you're saying he kind of go the other way, there's enough swing and a misses game that
Right.
maybe he doesn't run into enough of those. But I really hope in the Ozuna another year of maturity, things of that nature. He's got all the tools, man. I feel like it's when you think of 30 home runs, it's only 30 swings. They play so many games. Come on, like it's not that many when you think about it
Yeah,
from
it's
his
easy.
perspective.
It's
So
easy.
yeah, exactly. So I would say my wrap on the Pirates is historic year for the Pirates when you think of our lifetimes. because that means it ends in the playoffs, and that hasn't happened too many times in that aspect. So the Pirates are going to wrap their season. Let's be hopeful about it. I think if they get into that 80 plateau at any point, at any rate, that's another building block for the next year. I think they have a little bit of a window here, but why not this year with the lineup they have and the pitching staff they have?
Yeah, so I think we see the Pirates somewhat similar. It's just a matter of like there's a huge range of outcomes this year for the Pirates. This is gonna be a fun year. I don't think there's any scenario where like, oh my God, that was a terrible year. I think this is a step in that direction. I have written down this is the Jersey Shore year, Joe. This is, the shirt before the shirt. This is the year before the year where we really, they go in. I think they take a step, and this time next year, we're sitting here going, we'll be disappointed if they don't make the playoffs. I think that's the where this year leads. One thing too I wanted to add, this is kind of random, but my grandma, almost 90 years old, she goes, I did something I haven't done in almost 40 years. I sat down and listened to 2 Pirates games back to back. I don't know any of these players, but apparently we're supposed to be excited. So you can tell the hype's reaching certain levels when you hear something like that. Hey, I haven't listened to Pirates games in 40 years. So that was pretty funny to hear. So I'm ready. I'm all, you got me all in. You got me the whole way. I'm ready for this to be, again, I don't know that, in my opinion, I think this is the step in the right direction, but I'm excited. I can't wait to get excited about Pirates baseball again.
Well, for better or for worse, we'll know by the end of April if my bet has any chance of hitting. So we can kind of revisit this for sure. If they start this year anyway close to what they started last year, then we'll really ramp up draft talk. I guess kind of switch it over, but I'm hoping this will be a summer of Pirates baseball and take us right into football season, and really even have a little bit of overlap there for us for the first
Yeah,
time
that's
in
the
a little while.
best. All right, for the Steelers this week, we're going to play GM. I'm sure online you've seen all the PFF mocks. You'll continue to see them. So we wanted to kind of put our money where our mouth is and actually go through the first 3 rounds here and say who we would pick, how things might actually work out. So we're gonna play GM on PFF.
So is there anything, Justin, when we get started with this that you're looking that we want to start with when you think of that first round, or how we
Yeah, I
playing out this
think
draft?
so. I think it really depends, and you could see obviously the first round can go a bunch of different ways. They're right in that range. So this is an interesting type of a simulation here right now. So there's a lot of ways that the first round can obviously break for them. As you can see, if this was a real draft, it'd be real interesting that Panthers pick Mekhi Lemon. It'd be interesting to see if it gets to like that, if it plays out like that, what will actually happen. But in general, I think this is pretty similar to they're going to be looking like, what's going to be on the board in terms of their options. So if I can't see all of their everything that's available, but so they'd probably be looking at the safety from Toledo. They'd be looking at Cooper, and then basically some combination of the tackles. There's a top 3. We've been talking about top 3 at receiver for quite a while, obviously. There's a top 3 now at safety as well. Safety is a position I don't love taking in the first round, but I
No,
think this
let's
is
pass
one
on
year
safety.
where I would go safety here. That's who I would actually pick.
That's who
And I
you
am
take.
not a safety in the first round
You were just telling me
person.
that. You were just saying no safety in the first round, and then you immediately
I
say
know.
safety in the first
I know,
round.
but again, it's all about value. I think this is the one year where you could convince me. We'll go back and forth. I would probably go the safety from Toledo here. I'm assuming, are you leaning Cooper? You would go Cooper here?
Yeah, I think I would go Cooper here. I feel like
Okay.
that's the best value / need for the Steelers.
Yeah, let's
I
go.
can't
Let's go
bring
Cooper.
myself to take another tackle or offensive line.
Right.
I can't be
Yeah.
offensive
See,
line for me. So
and I do think Vega Iona, the guard from Penn State, is someone that I don't think he's going to fall to them. I think he'll probably go, especially like the Lions and a few of the teams before them could take him. But he is a player I'd really like to take. And again, I'm not usually interior offensive line in the first round either. But yeah, let's go Cooper.
all right.
And we'll see what's available. Part of the reason I like going, not like going safety, but I'm open to going safety is because of what sometimes is available in the second round. at receiver and at some of the other positions. So so Bernard is one guy I love, but sometimes he'll fall to them in the second round. Obviously, he didn't here, so it kind of works out because we just took a receiver.
You love
I
Bernard for the
would,
Steelers in the second round, though. If he were,
I
if
do, I do.
things
Yeah, I
flipped,
am a Bernard fan. And they could
okay.
go Browns. There's a couple guys they could go here, but that's part of the reason why I'm okay, depending on the board. Again, it's always relevant or relative to what's on the board. But depending on what's on the board in the first, I do like some of the receiver options in the second. So I don't think it's the worst thing if they don't. I'm not. It doesn't. I don't know. It necessarily makes sense for them to go corner. I don't think Keontae Scott's gonna be around. I think he just ran a 4.3 today. I don't know. He may jump way up boards. This might not be realistic for him being there at this point. But this is where it gets a little dicey with, I don't love the offensive line options as much in the second round. Like that Jennings Dunker, I think he'll probably end up being a guard out of Iowa, but he could actually be the pick here. What's available at linebacker? I saw Rodriguez just went.
Yes, that's who I was actually targeting in the second round in my
I don't
world
think
for
he's
the
going to be
Steelers. I
there
would
when they go to
love
pick. Yeah.
that fall. But if he went to the Ravens like that, man, that's
Yeah, that
not
would
what
be
you want
not
to see
ideal.
either.
We'll have to do a simulation at one. We'll be doing these obviously. So we'll have to do a simulation at some point where I would love, and it's easy to say this, and there are simulations on here where you can trade down. We talked about this a little bit last week, but a scenario where they trade down in the first, get a receiver we still like, and then move up in the second. You start playing these out and you see why it makes so much sense, especially if you want linebacker. They can move up to get like a Rodriguez or Allen, the linebacker out of Georgia, who people really like. So again,
Well,
they
I
could go a
forced us to
couple different
Cooper,
ways.
so you make this pick for us here in the second round.
Let me see a defensive interior real quick. Yeah, I don't know that there's really anyone that there's. Grayson Halton could be a decent pick here. It might be a little bit early for him. Scroll back up to the top. Yeah, I honestly, value-wise, Keontae Scott is probably not a bad pick. Keontae Scott or Jennings Dunker, I'd be fine with. So either of those two, whichever of those two you like a little bit more.
No, you make the pick on this one. I forced Cooper on you in the first round. Tell me which.
All right, go Keontae Scott just for value.
So we got 3 picks coming up now in the third round. What positions are you saying the Steelers could be filling in the third round?
So this would be a safety spot for sure. Kamari Ramsey might be a guy that makes a little bit of sense. Zakee Wheatley, maybe. I think he might be more of a free safety. So it just depends on how they view their safeties long term. This could be a defensive interior spot. We just went interior offensive line, so I think we're probably good there. This is the range where if you really want to double up on receiver, I think this is, again, a reason why I think I'm okay with them possibly passing on receiver in the first round is the receiver in the second and day two, really, in general, I really like. Yeah, I'm not as crazy about the defensive interior names there. This is where it'll be a you versus me thing in the third round at receiver with Surratt. I really like Hurst. I really like Stribling and Fields too. So I like all of the more of your outside receivers that are kind of sitting here. And this could play out a bunch of different ways, but there's some really nice outside receivers that I like. If I had to guess what they would do in this situation, I think they would probably go with like a Kamari Ramsey, the safety from you, would be my guess.
Yeah,
There's
I
a
think
bunch of different
safety
ways
could
they
make
could go.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Steelers already did just kind of have the cornerback. This is when you get interesting when you kind of run these scenarios too, is just how many picks the Steelers have. They're only on pick 3, and they have 2 more picks coming up. So let's make a quick one here because we got 2 more in the third. So we'll go Kamari Ramsey here, and we'll moving on to the next pick just a few later. And what are you feeling like here since we had the safety? I feel like there, offense is really the struggle point for the Steelers, and we really haven't been adding to the offense. What we did in the first round, but what do you think otherwise?
I think that they're fine at yeah, so now would be either interior offensive line or maybe double up on receiver. We like enough of the receivers here, so they could go that way. Or interior on either side of the line. I would love them to go. Yeah. So again, if they really wanted to double up on receivers, I'd be fine with any of those three top receivers, any three of those top receivers.
Would you rather do the double up on the receiver or go interior offensive line?
They could go either here. I don't love any. I'm not that Hesh. I've heard decent things about him from Kansas or Kansas State. I mean, but again, he's probably more of a center, so I don't know that necessarily matters.
Yeah, I feel like
I
we
would go
should
again in a vacuum receiver here. I really like.
receiver, and then would that be Ted Hurst?
Yeah, I would probably go Ted Hurst here. Oh, and he's sitting right there for you, Joe. He's
And there we
sitting
go.
right
That's
there
how we're
for
wrapping
you.
up the draft.
Yeah, I like that.
We're not going to go any other way. I was almost going to have us do that on the last pick. So there we go.
Perfect. You got your guy accidentally there. He just fell into your lap.
So overall draft grade B minus. All right, we're on March 23rd. So we're pretty far away from the Olympic break now. And the Pens are still in second place, playoff spot. I'd say they're staying afloat through this really tough schedule that still has a few more games left. A little Ron Burgundy in there. But some cracks are starting to show up. That game on Sunday against Carolina looked pretty ugly. What do you think, Justin? Do they got enough in the tank to hold on here?
Yeah, I'm starting to get worried too. I think if you look at the points, like you just mentioned, since the Olympic break, they're right in the middle of the pack, which to be fair is fine with no Crosby and the schedule they play. But again, we've got another week here before it starts to lighten up. 2 points separate 6 teams now. Really, when you look at it's not just in the Metro at this point. You've got the Bruins and the Red Wings in the Atlantic that are right there, and you're basically competing against these other 5 teams just directly at this point. So, does feel like they're losing a little steam. I was saying the other night when they were up in the one game, they're just going to score a touchdown every night and they're going to win every game. But to be honest, it feels like at this point that they have to, or else they're not going to win games night to night. The goaltending, we'll get into it here, but goaltending and basically 2/3 of their blue line is just a mess right now. So I'm definitely getting worried.
Yeah, you hit on the main things that you just can't give up that many goals and that many shots night after night and win. They don't have that type of offense. They can definitely score goals, but they don't have enough to cover up that many warts. So in net is really probably the thing that changes teams faster than anything else. When you have a goalie that's really making some stops, especially from shots from long distance that have snuck in the Pens the last few games. But you got Skinner who's given up 34 goals in his last 9 games, and Silovs have given up 19 goals in his last 5. So it's not a question of which one of those is a number one goalie. Neither of those is a number one goalie. Maybe their number one goalie is our fave goalie in the AHL right now. I don't know if you sprinkle him into this type of, shot type aspect, but that's probably the only thing that's on the other side, unless one of these guys really starts to get hot.
Yeah, and like you said before, we talked about Miroshov before, but what concerns me with him is this blue line. I mean, you basically got Carlson is playing great, Wotherspoon, like that's a great pairing, but there's just no, I mean, they just look lost. Letang looks like all the inefficiencies he's had in his career, he's been able to overcome them and be a great defenseman, when he was younger. All of those things are very obvious now, and he's clearly not the player, which that part isn't bad. I don't expect him to be the player he was before, but he still has the mental issues. He doesn't process super fast with the puck in his own zone. And again, the pairing, I don't know at this point, you can't pair Gerard and Letang. They're the same player. So when you have them on the ice, I was surprised they even went to it in the first place. It just seemed like that was common sense. They were the same player. They look like the same player when they're on the ice at the same time. So I don't think you can pair them together. The concern is you really shouldn't break up the first pairing in Carlson Wotherspoon. And really, you've got one other serviceable defenseman in Shea, and he's not even playing right now. So Graves was brutal. Here it has been brutal. Beyond that, I mean, you're looking at guys that you're not going to be comfortable playing crazy minutes. They're basically third pairing defensemen. We knew this was the weakness. This isn't like this is new. We knew the goaltending was what it was. They've just got to get a little bit more out of their second, third pairings because Carlson has literally played at an MVP level. I think I saw the stat, going into the Carolina game, I think he was tied for most points since February 28th. I mean, that's crazy to be playing at that level, getting that from Carlson at this age, and their defense overall looks like it does right now. It makes sense why the rumors were what they were about adding a defenseman. I understand why they didn't, but man, they've just faded this blue line, other than, again, that top pairing since the Olympic break.
Yeah, I mean, everyone is giving Dubas a lot of credit, as he should, with kind of how he's done with this roster. But at the same time, he shuffled some deck chairs when it came to defensemen.
Right.
One defenseman out, Gerard in, and you just said Gerard's the same player as a really bad Letang. And Letang is also the guy that probably is the one out of the golden three for the Pens that is the most questionable contract for sure.
Yep.
When you're looking at it in hindsight, and probably was at the time when you think of his play style and how you'd expect that to age over the last few games, because he doesn't have that, physical aspect that Malkin has, or just the overall, true greatness that Crosby does on the side things.
It's also just more glaring for a defenseman that you
True.
can't hide, especially a second pairing defenseman. Now it's even harder to hide him when you add a player that plays like him next to him. But you have a steady stay at home guy, like you can maybe hide him. They don't have a third defenseman to hide him with, is the biggest issue.
Yeah. Shea might be the most important Penguin to come back right now. When you think of when we're talking injuries, because Ryan Graves is not an NHL player at this point. There's got to be somebody
Mm.
else down in Wilkes-Barre that can put up better minutes than Graves. But when you see this blue line and kind of the depth of the blue line, it really is shocking that Dubas wasn't able to get anybody to come in. It probably points to there were so many teams in the NHL that were still in it. There weren't that many sellers when it came to the
Right. Yeah,
deadline
it
that were
was
really kind of flipping some of those teams.
definitely a seller's market, which was why you even heard the Penguins, like names for the Penguins were coming up as possible trade pieces, which didn't really make sense. But I get why they didn't. Yeah, it's just rough watching them at times. And the combination, you could hide some of these mistakes with good goaltending, or vice versa if you had maybe two more. The combination of the two is just rough to watch, night to night. They'll have decent games, and they'll have games where it's like, man, this is not a playoff team with their defense. So hopefully, some of this they can mix the pairings up. Some of the pairings have been a little odd in general, so hopefully mixing some of them up, helps. But I don't want it to be overstated that how good Carlson has been, though. He has been I would argue he's been their team MVP this year. He's just been on fire. He basically won them a game in reality against Winnipeg over the weekend. So hopefully they can just do something else on the blue line, because they've been rough, to say the least.
Yeah, and he has been great. Carlson's definitely hitting the headlines though because of his scoring touch as well.
Oh yeah.
So
Yep.
he's not necessarily the defenseman just kind of controlling the game completely
Right.
back there. But the last point I'll kind of make that's a little bit more on the downside for the Pens is they're in the stretch here, not only tough teams, but a lot of games in March. So the most games ever in March for the Pens that they played, 17 games. And that's wearing on a team that is older. They have sprinkles of youth in there. And honestly, some of that youth is so young that many games is probably a negative on that side as well. But someone like Malkin just looks noticeably slower when he's in some of these back-to-backs, and it just makes it harder for the Pens to overcome a back-to-back, also when they're playing a tough opponent like the Hurricanes like they were on Sunday.
Yeah, and I saw this stat with Malkin, like to piggyback off that. I think Malkin, I can't remember the total games. It's something like, I'm going to be off on the exact number, something like 15 games. He has 2 points in like his last 15 or so games against the Hurricanes. Stahl just drives him insane. I think Yoey was saying this today. And it's they're a fast team, and he just does not match up well against them, which is unfortunate because their path at some point will have to go through Carolina regardless of what happens here. So not ideal, but hopefully they can figure out the blue line and the goaltending situation here.
Here's a what if for you. What if the Pens' big three, instead of Crosby, Malkin, Letang, was Crosby, Malkin, Stahl down the middle?
Uh, it's hard to say. I mean, I don't know how I could predict what would have happened necessarily. To be fair, Letang was one of their better players in
Yeah.
2016 on that run. I know. I was thinking about this the other day because they were talking about him. I was thinking about the trades they made. I mean, they also got a player like Dumoulin out of that. So like it's hard to.
It all worked out. The
It's
Pens
really
won
hard to.
back-to-back cups and things of that nature,
Right.
but,
Right.
you can't say it was a bad thing, but I'm just saying, what are the alternate Jerry world where it's, 20 years of those 3 players down the middle
Yeah,
would
it
be
would
pretty
be
sweet
fun to
too.
play out because they would have been impossible to scheme against in the playoffs long term when you have 3 centers like that. Yeah, it would have been just not that they weren't a nightmare to play against when they figured it out and figured out how to build a roster a different way, but they were just coming into their own when they had to move him. And yeah, that would have been wild to see them keep a player like Stahl long term.
Yeah, and he stayed with the Hurricanes ever since that trade. That's what kinda triggered
Right.
it to me, is he wasn't someone that's flipped around a lot in the league. So, either way, I think the Pens are really on a positive this season, so you can just gotta continue to ride the wave. Got 12 games left, we're taping on Monday, so that's kinda what we're looking at. If we how many points do you think from here on out, 12 games left, does it take for the Pens to make the playoffs? I feel like it's gotta be at least 18, 20.
I there are some games like head to head coming up with all these teams. So like just making the playoffs, I could see 16 to 18. They do have, it's going to be somewhere in that ballpark. You can't expect to get in. Maybe they accidentally get in because again, these other teams do have some tough stretches coming up too. So maybe you accidentally get in, if you're a point per game or slightly above that. But I would say 16 would be my. We'll have to bookmark this.
We are.
16 would
We're
be
gonna have
my
to do
over
some
under.
magic number on the way out the door. The last 12 games. Ooh, this is what you want. This is what you want. A lot to look at, and we'll see how it goes.
All right, so to jump right back into the tournament, like we said, we're gonna touch on the tournament a little bit here. Our bets, our bets were good. We were due, or we should have been rewarded a little better than we were. One of us, I may not be mad that I'm now 5-1 on the show, and I should be 6-0, but I feel like the 3 games I bet on last week were certainly 3 of the more exciting games. A big comeback against me, a big comeback for me. And then somehow my underdog lost on a half-court buzzer beater just to send it into overtime. So that's the way betting goes sometimes. To transition from that straight into my picks this week, I may not be over that Kentucky Santa Clara loss because my justification for my first bet here. So I went Iowa plus 1.5, basically a coin flip. My reasoning, and you're going to have something to say about this because you're going to take the other side of it. So Iowa beat Nebraska straight up by 5 at home. They lost in overtime on the road. So clearly this is in my mind, that's a coin flip. I may have seen the overtime loss and still had that Kentucky loss in my head. But again, this is a coin flip. I like the way Iowa's been playing. I do like Nebraska too, to be fair. I have them going quite far in my bracket, but you give me that 1.5. I think these are evenly matched teams that know each other. So I'm going to go the Iowa side on that one, plus 1.5.
Yeah, no, I go big red on this side, Nebraska. I still can't believe that this tournament this year in the year of 2026 was the first year that Nebraska got an NCAA tournament win in their program history. And they
That's
also made it to the
crazy.
Sweet 16, and they're also going to be making it to the Elite Eight. So, what a draw for them to draw Iowa. Like you said, a team that's
Yeah.
familiar with them, which makes an unfamiliar place like the Sweet 16 feel just like home. That crowd, that Nebraska crowd, I'm telling you, is going to travel like crazy when it comes to that Thursday game. It is going to be absolutely red. That's why I think they're a slight favorite in the game. And why not, when you got that pick 'em, take 'em the slight favorite? Just love, that little bit of Nebraska ball. I do think their point guard is someone that Hoiberg, coach's son, that, without that coach's son dynamic, there is no way he even sees close to a Division I floor. But he's earned his keep. He's a fifth-year senior. He's probably a poor man's Aaron Kraft. And, he has a really good shot at kind of being that Elite Eight point guard for Nebraska.
My second pick here, I just think Houston is on a roll right now. If you look back, even their losses at the end of the season, in the Big 12, I mean, Arizona's on a different level. Like, I think they were maybe even slightly disrespected because of playing that Big 12, playing Arizona. So I don't hate Illinois, but I am going to take Houston giving the 3.5 in that game. I just think they're on a roll at this point. So
Oh, no, I agree completely with that. I feel like I could easily had that on my side too. I feel like this weekend will prove out just like this past weekend has, where the majority of the favorites will win and the majority of the favorites will cover. So I think if you ride the favorites the majority of the time, I think that'll pay off for you. I'm going to finish off with two favorites of my own. I feel like UConn at -1.5 is a line that I'm a little surprised of. I feel like Michigan State's a solid squad, but I think they've overreached a little bit. I think they're a little overseeded at 3. That's why they were able to kind of have a little bit of a cruise into the Sweet 16. I think that journey stops with UConn here. That UConn team is really good, and they know how to win in March. And then lastly, I think Arizona -7.5 against Arkansas. I think Arkansas with Calipari. Calipari's always has a young team. It's a young team this year. That's a team that really could get a little cold. And Arizona is just so good. I think they're the best team left in the tournament. Maybe you could have the argument with Michigan. The guard play that Arizona has, I think, is unmatched. And really, I think -7.5 is a number that they could probably reach in the first half.
Yeah, and that backcourt, that's what wins in March. There's analysts calling this the Arizona Invitational. So I mean, yeah, they're my. I mean, I have them winning. So I like that pick for sure.
All right, we're gonna do a quick wrap for a baseball nostalgia moment, and then we'll let you guys go. Tonight is gonna be first favorite pirate. So who is our first favorite pirate growing up? This is where you get some names that are coming out of the woodwork when it comes to us. But my two were Pokey Reese and Tyke Redmond. So Tyke Redmond was absolutely atrocious, but he was a center fielder and could have been a little bit better, but terrible player. Pokey Reese was actually pretty decent. It was a fun player. He only had a shorter stint for the Pirates, but he was very flashy next to Jack Wilson, so that up the middle pairing was really fun to watch. Also, I could have never pulled off dreads, so maybe it was just a little bit that kind of like the Pokey Reese dreads on that side too.
I thought you might go Pokey Reese. I remember the bobblehead. I remember you being a big Pokey Reese fan, so that makes sense. We're definitely gonna date ourselves with these, just to be clear. These are, these are gonna show our age a bit here. I will say, I think if I technically answered this would really make me seem old. I would technically have to go Jay Bell. I didn't go Jay Bell because I think that was more so just because I had a starting lineup figure of him. I didn't actually like watch him play. I was a little too young for that. But he was technically who I would have said, but doesn't really count. So I went more realistic answer. So I went Kevin Young with my actual pick. Jose Guillen was my honorable mention. I was a big fan at this time of like guys who struggled at the plate, but like were ridiculous. I remember I was a game where he threw a guy out at third base from right field. He really found his bat after they left Pittsburgh. Ironic. I think it was with the Angels when he really took off from the plate and, had all-star caliber player overall. But he was awesome coming up with the Pirates. I remember just some of the throws he made from right field. But yeah, Kevin Young was my answer. Underrated 3-year stretch for sure. Go back and look the numbers up in the late 90s, 97
Sure.
and 99. He was really good. Really good first baseman in general. I think I did see he set a stat too for putouts and fielding percentage. So it wasn't like it was just at the plate, but really underrated, good first baseman. Everything he did, written down, everything he did was smooth. Like even his stance, like the way he would point at the batter, bring the bat back slowly, I thought was always just super cool. Yeah, fourth most home runs at Three Rivers all time too. I never would have guessed that. So again, I just think he was an underrated player. I always liked Kevin Young. Late 90s, I love those red brimmed hats that they had, the all black jerseys. That was like our peak of right before I moved. So probably part of the reason that, and then right after the early 2000s with PNC were just such an awesome time growing up as a Pirate fan. Maybe not always in the win-loss column, but those were like our teams.
Yeah, they had some good players. Kevin Young was there for a long time. He signed that second
Yeah.
contract with them, and I feel like that's a big deal. I kind of wanted to sprinkle in Brian Giles here. He's a little late for the
Yeah.
first pirate aspect, but I
Yep.
love Brian Giles. He's someone when you go back and look at stat lines, and you're like, how the hell did Brian Giles have that type of stat line? And it
He
was
was awesome. I
absolutely
mean, he was
amazing.
by far and away their best batter for, years. And he was, again, he was that like coming out of the 90s. I mean, by far their best player. We could have both probably said Brian Giles. He was just so good for them. But I like that we both went a little off the board with our picks.
Yeah, what's wrong with Tyke Redmond when it comes down to it? So if you're still listening about Tyke Redmond, again, probably one of the real ones. Like and subscribe if you haven't, though. But we appreciate you hanging on. See you next Wednesday.
See you later.